How's it going, everybody? Squeegee Down on Toy here, and today we're going to be taking a look at texturing a basic object in Substance Painter for use in our Unity project for SkaterXL. To begin with, we're going to hop into Blender. So the reason we hop into Blender is because there's a few things we need to take care of in Blender on our object before we can export it and successfully texture it in Substance Painter. Step one is I'm going to hop in here and go ahead and show you guys. This is something that you should already be doing for Unity. Just to clarify, we have our bottom part of our ledge, which is going to be a different color from the upper part of the ledge, separated into two materials. So the lower part is material 1 and the upper part is material 2. That allows us to apply separate textures to each of these very easily. The next thing we need to make sure is, as always, we need to check our face orientation, make sure that our full object is blue, and then of course the final step is going to be UV unwrapping. So I'm going to take material 01, select it, press U, and I'm just going to use Smart UV Project. I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to grab material, select that, press U, Smart UV Project, hit OK. Okay, and now my object should be ready for use in Substance Painter. So I can go File, Export, and you want to always export as an FBX for use with Substance Painter. As you can see, I've already got it ready to go. Export. Okay, and now we can go ahead and hop right into Substance Painter. This is the screen you'll see when you get into Substance Painter. We can go ahead and hit Close. I'm going to go File, New. My template that I'm going to be using is going to be Unity 5 Algorithmic. I'm going to select, I'm going to navigate to wherever I have stored the exported FBX, and we can leave the rest of these settings as they are. Hit OK. Okay, so we've loaded in. As you can see here, we've got two views. On the left, we have our 3D view. By holding left Alt and using the left mouse button, I can rotate, and the middle mouse button I can pan. And then on the right here, we have our 2D view. And this is exactly what it sounds like. This is what our textures look like unwrapped and projected onto 2D plane. Over here, we've got our layers, much like Photoshop, and down here is our shelf. This is all the tools that we'll be using. Now I have some custom materials and textures that I've imported into Substance Painter, and really quick I'll show you guys how to do that. So what we have is you need to download SBS ARs, or I think the other one is SBR. There's two file types you can use for this. I like to use SBS ARs. And then you need to navigate to your Documents, Algorithmic folder, Substance Painter, and Shelf. And this is where all of your materials and resources are stored for Substance Painter. And then you can go to your materials and you can literally just drag and drop these items in. I've already done that with everything that I need. I got all of these from the Substance launcher under Substance Source. You can download all sorts of free materials. And I also created quite a few using Substance Alchemist, which is a very easy to use program that you can use to generate your own basic materials. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started here. So I have this concrete dusty material here that I made in Substance Alchemist. We're going to go ahead and make that the base color for the main majority of our ledge here. Over here we have quite a few tools that we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this up a bit so we have a better view of what we're working with. So our projection is as it sounds. You can either use UV, which is based on the UV unwrap that you did over in Blender. You can also use triplanar, much like in Unity. What this does is it projects the texture onto a cube essentially, and then bakes that on your object, I guess is a way I could describe it. It's kind of hard to visualize, but as you can see, it doesn't ever change no matter what your UV unwrap looks like. It always will be the same texture no matter what. And then you have your planar, which is that but only on one plane, and then your spherical, which I don't really know how to use. I assume you use that on spheres. But we're just going to go ahead and use our UV projection. It's not perfect, but it'll work. So we'll just leave that as it is. I think it's fine. And we'll go ahead and move on to adding our base color for our top section. So I'm going to use this same texture actually, but we're going to go ahead and make some adjustments. So we can come over here to our layers, and I can right click, and I'm going to add levels. And this first one I'm going to do is base color. And by using these sliders, I can change the color. And we can make it darker. What I want is a dark gray on top of a light gray color. So that actually looks quite good for what I'm trying to achieve. And then something else we can do is with these levels, we can do a lot of different things. So the first one was a base color, but we can also change the height or the roughness or the metallic or the normal. So for instance, if we take the roughness, we can make it a far more reflective surface, or we can dial that way back and make it a really rough surface. So that's a really good tool you can use to very quickly adjust the roughness of the entire material that you're working on. Okay, so we're going to delete that for now though, and we're going to go ahead and drag our layer 1 above here. And now the next thing we can do is come down to our brushes, and let's go ahead and add some scratches to this and simulate some grind marks on here. So my favorite is the sandpaper material, at least for starters, or brush rather. And we can go ahead and scroll way down here and change our color. So I don't want a material, I want a color for my brush. So I'm just going to delete the material mode and go to base color, and we're going to go with a nice, pretty much a black actually, just a little shy of black. And we're going to go ahead and change this roughness. So as you can see, this is what our material look like. So if we dial this all the way into the black, we're going to be coloring in anywhere that I draw will be rendered as a more reflective part. But I think that somewhere that's getting scratched by skateboards is probably going to be rougher than the surface itself. So there we go. We can go ahead, and if I hold control, I can use my mouse. If I move my mouse forward and back, it rotates. If I move my mouse right and left, it changes the flow, or the hardness essentially. You can see the flow slider in that top left changing. And I can use the right mouse button with control to change the size, as well as the scroll wheel does the same. And then the right mouse button forward and back is the hardness itself. So this is hardness, and this is flow. So it kind of gives you, flow is almost more like opacity, and hardness is hardness, if that makes any sense at all. So control and right mouse button left and right is size, forward and back is hardness. And then there is an actual opacity slider, but I like to leave that at 100. And then we can adjust our opacity over here with the layering. So I'm going to go ahead and dial the hardness back and make it a little smaller and rotate it. I'm going to change my angle jitter down a bit. These are sort of like randomization settings. So as you can see in this little preview here, when I turn the angle jitter up, it will spawn the strokes at various angles randomly. Okay, so we can just go ahead and start drawing on our object here. And it's good to kind of move your camera around sometimes because the lighting in this can be a little deceptive. And as you can see in our 2D port, as I draw on our 3-dimensional object, it is also changing the 2-dimensional object. Or it is just showing us how it looks on our 2-dimensional texture. Alright, that's pretty good. We've gone ahead and roughed that up a bit. And let's just do that to the other side. Nice, that looks alright for starters. Next thing we can do is we can toss another layer on here. I like to keep all my different kind of colors and textures as separate layers so I can adjust them individually. And we'll add sort of like a light scratches technique here to simulate the concrete kind of getting worn down to the underlying color of concrete, which is always gray. That's a little too much. So this is kind of where our other settings really come into play. So for instance, I can go with a larger but a very soft texture. And I don't quite like that actually. The angle jitter is too high. As you can see, it's spawning it at all sorts of wild angles. That changes every time you change brush. These jitter settings will change as well. It's good to just sort of play with these sliders and see what they do. Alright, and do that to the other side as well. Okay, that's a pretty good start. That looks fairly roughed up. And then one more thing we can do is we can go ahead and toss another layer on here. And this time we're going to just simulate some dirt on the top and the sides as well. And I'll show you how we can do that to both. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a dirt brush. We'll go with this one here. And all I'm going to do is come on down here, change my color here to something more in the brown region. Go with that. That's a nice dark brown. And dial that flow way back. And there we go. We've drawn that on. But what we can do is we can draw this sort of everywhere that it might be on our ledge, on this layer, so that it sort of overlaps with both layers. So there's some dirt on here, but it'll also overlap. And then what we can do is we can take this layer, copy, come up here to our first one. I'm going to delete this. And we can paste our layer in. And now we've got our dirt effects will spread really seamlessly from one material to another. And that way there's no weird jarring effects where the dirt on the lower part does not align with the upper part. And the next thing we can do is we can add, this is pretty good, we can add a little more maybe texture on the bottom where there would be like some grass and dirt at the seam of the concrete. I'm going to go ahead and actually put this on a different layer. There we go, it's nice subtle. I like to use more subtle colors and then sort of color on more as I go. And I'm not really concerned about getting dirt on the bottom here since you're not going to see that often, if ever. Okay, and there we go. That's a pretty good looking texture we got going on here. So a couple other little things to keep track of is we've got our roughness and our height and our normal as well on here. But you can disable what it affects. So if we only wanted this to be drawing color and not roughness or normal, we can disable those, and now only color is being affected by what I'm drawing. So that won't change the normal map. So if you want scratches, but the scratches don't change the normal, you can disable this. But I like to, most of the time, just leave them all on until it looks really weird. Because usually with this sort of stuff, we're not making that big of an impact on those layers. And what we do make is realistic looking. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some final touches on this. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That's a nice detail. The next thing we're going to do is take a little look at maybe adding some cracks to our concrete surface. So for this one, we're going to change up how we're doing this. I added a new layer, and we're going to come down to normal. We're going to change this from uniform color, and we're going to grab something that maybe could add some cool normal texturing to this map, or to this ledge. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this grunge scratches rough. I don't know how this will look, but we'll give it a shot. And we're going to disable everything else. This is only going to be scratches. And we are going to change our alpha to a solid object because we're just drawing on normal. There we are. What the alpha is it's just the shape of your brush. So now we can see I have the alpha as a circle, and then I've got these cool scratches representing where my normal is going to be drawn in. And let's go ahead and play around with this a little bit. So it's a little hard to see what I'm doing here in our regular render, but if we go ahead and change our view mode to normal, you can see how I'm affecting the normal map and what that might do to our map in game. So just give it some scribbles, and there you go. You can kind of see it changes the normal map, but not the color very much. So that's affecting the way that the shadows are rendering on this object. Okay, so one final thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add one more layer, and we're actually going to move this layer. Actually, yeah, so we're actually going to move our scratches down beneath all our other layers here so that it renders the dirt on top of the scratches as it would be in real life. And our final move here is I'm just going to grab a random nice kind of dirty brush here. That's not too bad. But now instead of using a color, we're going to use a material. So we're going to turn to our materials. And what I want to add is this mossy mud material I've made in Substance Alchemist. And we can drag down our Substance Material mode. As you can see now, what we're doing is drawing this mud, this kind of muddy grass effect that I've got going on here, onto our material. And I have it set to normal, height, rough, everything, so it's affecting all those, but I could turn off normal and only draw the color and the roughness and the height. It's got height. There we go. And now we've kind of got like this really gross grassy corner going on here. Yeah, that looks real nasty. This is a pretty grungy ledge. And there we go. That's kind of what I'm looking for. It's got this kind of gross corner, but the rest of it's just sort of your standard grunge, and then a nice scratched up top surface. And we can always go in and adjust these layers and change their normal. So for instance, if I want these scratches, if I want these scratches to be more pronounced on the normal map, what I can do is I can right click. We can go back to our levels. I'm going to change this to normal this time. And if we look at our normal map, you can see it bumps it way up. Super defined. You can just sort of mess with these sliders to get the result that you're looking for. Cool, that looks fine to me. Alright, very satisfied with the texture I've got going on here, so I'm going to go ahead and save. And you can save these wherever you want. Okay, so now that we've saved, our next step is going to be to go ahead and export textures. And we're going to come here to our config, and we're going to change to Unity HD render pipeline, and we're going to turn dithering off. This is the thing that draws all those like crazy lines you see when people share textures. We can just go ahead and disable that. You don't really need that. Or we can also just turn it straight to a 16-bit material. And then the final thing is we're going to select where we're exporting to, And we can change our document size here. For SkaterXL, I think that 2K is our best export size. And now we can just go ahead and hit export. Okay, so our export's finished. I like to always just open up the folder, and here we have all of the textures I've exported, and you can see I've got my ledge materials here. Here's the top, and here's the side, and now we can go ahead and pop into Unity and apply these to our object. Alright guys, here we are in Unity now, and I've got my ledge materials applied, and we can go ahead and get those set up like we would with any other material. Go ahead and drag my ledge texture down, and already we can see that it's taken hold of my object. Oh, that red light is due to that, so you can ignore that. And go ahead and add our mask map. This is the beauty of using Substance Painters. It comes default with that preset with a mask map, and our normal map. And go ahead and fix that, and we can go ahead and dial way back. But there you go, we've got a pretty sweet grunge effect going on here. We can change our smoothness remapping if we want, make it smoother or less smooth, but I'm pretty happy with the way it looks by default. And we can go ahead and do that with our other material here. And let's say I'm not happy with this texture. For instance, I am not a huge fan of how much normal mapping happened here. It's a little too much, so we can pop back into Substance Painter and track down where that's happening. I think I'm gonna have to look at my normal map. Yep, it's that for sure. So what we can do is find where I have all of this, and this is part of what's great about doing it in this manner where everything is layered out differently, because I can just come over here, and there we go, it's layer 5 is where my scratches are. I could probably name that, and we can grab our eraser tool, and I'm just gonna erase some normal mapping here. I think there's a little too much normal mapping happening, and we can change our alpha to something a little dirtier, so we'll use this cloudy dirt, and I'm going to turn the flow way down, and we could just sort of fix this normal map where I think maybe it's a little too much. Went a little ham with the normal mapping tool, and we could just kind of use the same techniques that we've been using to dial back what has caused this really bizarre normal map. And we can do it over here as well, kind of make both of these spots look a little more organic, a little less bizarre and wild. There we go, and this is actually probably where the real issue is happening now that I think about it. Okay, that looks a lot better. I think that normal map looks a little more reasonable for what we're trying to achieve. And now we can go ahead, and this is the really nice thing, we can export textures, but this time I only want to export that one material, right? This other material was fine, so we can just uncheck that and export this to where the other one was, and it'll go ahead and just automatically replace our texture that we had. And then we can open our folder and re-add this to Unity by deleting the old one and replacing it with this new one. Alright, as you can see, our normal map looks a little more reasonable. It's still got that really grungy, nasty look effect to it, but it's far more reasonable, and we can kind of rotate it to look at it in different lighting. Here's that cool grungy grassy corner that we did. You can see sort of the scratches on the top. If we were to take this ledge trim and really get into the nitty-gritty normal map, you can see how scraped up it is. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave it nice and low at its near its default setting, at or near its default setting. And there you go, guys. That's a pretty good looking texture. You know, this kind of is another example of what can be achieved with this. We've got our barrel, and you can kind of see this is going to have fire. Well, it does have fire in it, if the fire will render. It's got fire in it, and you can kind of see we've got these sort of like the burnt edges and this really crummy interior kind of trash look, trashy ashes, and then we've got some burn marks on these kind of wood sticks poking out. This is just another example of what can kind of be accomplished with the same sort of techniques that I just demonstrated. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. I know that was kind of a lot, but Substance Painter is a very in-depth program, and honestly I could make an entire series on it, which I'm not going to do. If you want to learn more about Substance Painter, you should probably just go to their website and check out all the tutorials there, or online on YouTube, or a dozen other places where there's lots of people who are far more knowledgeable on the topic than I am. But hopefully what I've shown you today is a good example of how you can kind of get it started in our SkaterXL map, and then you can learn more advanced techniques from people who know what they're doing. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, let me know what you would like to see in the future, and keep an eye out for upcoming stuff that I'm working on in the Discord. Some big stuff coming out in the near future. Alright, thanks and bye.